Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Scuttlebutt. I'm your host, Sean Hall, Director of Programming with the Veterans Breakfast Club. We're a nonprofit in Western PA whose mission is to create communities of listening around veterans and their stories to connect, educate, heal, and inspire. If you've been watching the Scuttlebutt this season, you may have seen the episode that highlighted the Office of Veterans Programs at Penn State University. Coming on the program today is an alumni of Penn State. Her name is Rachel Nostrand. She is a 5.5-year Marine Corps veteran who left the service and decided to become an aspiring war correspondent. She writes for militarytimes.com. She also wrote an article for New York Magazine titled The Rescuer. This is about her recent trip into Ukraine, which I highly recommend and is going to be here, a link in the description for you to click on and read. Rachel goes into her family history, which is very extensive in the military, why she decided to join the Marine Corps, and what I think is like the 3 lives that she lived while serving. She is driven and is a go-getter, and I think you'll find out why. Her story is incredible. I hope that you enjoy our conversation with Rachel, and if this is your first time joining the Scuttlebutt, please check out our other episodes, which are available across all podcast platforms, or you can watch us on YouTube. You can check us out on veteransbreakfastclub.org, and on YouTube, please like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell here so that you're the first to know when we release new episodes. If you also have any comments or questions, thoughts about the Scuttlebutt, or ideas for future episodes, you can email me at Sean, SHAUN, at veteransbreakfastclub.org. Thank you so much for joining the episode today, and I hope you enjoy.
Hi, I'm Rachel Nostrand. I was in the Marine Corps for 5.5 years. I enlisted right out of high school in 2013, and then I got out, was medically separated in December of 2018. So I was actually 6 months past the end of my original contract. I served as a Middle Eastern cryptologic linguist, so I spoke Levantine Iraqi and Modern Standard Arabic and did signals intel. Deployed once to North Africa and the Middle East, and then I last year finished up my undergrad at Penn State, and now I write for Military Times and Defense News.
Awesome. Rachel, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. You and I have been chatting back and forth through email, and one of our previous episodes, we had Penn State, the Office of Veterans Programs on, but let's start back in 2013. Okay. You decide to go Marine Corps. Now, that's hardcore, definitely. Why did you decide that?
Well, we actually have to go slightly farther back than 2013. So my entire family is in the military or has been, and everybody is an officer except for me.
Oh boy.
So, yeah. My mom was an Army signals intelligence officer for 27 years. My dad was in the Navy as a logistics or supply officer for 20 flat. My stepdad was an Air Force officer in intelligence for 22, I think. And my sister and my brother-in-law are both Army field artillery officers right now. Wow. So run it back to 2012, and I'm a junior in high school. I absolutely did not want to enlist. I did not want to join the military at all. I kind of hated the military because this was peak Afghan years. And my mom and my stepdad, who I lived with, had been gone for pretty much the past 4 or 5 years. And I kind of blamed the military for that a little bit. So I was on my own a lot. Didn't want to enlist, just wanted to go to college, but I was like a lot of military children, I think, kind of suffering from a little bit of abandonment issues, and so I was acting out, and I got in trouble. I got caught shoplifting, and I was like, wow, I suck as a person.
Oh.
So the next day, after my parents sat down and were like, you're grounded forever.
Forever, no, till eternity.
Yeah. I was like, I think I'm gonna postpone going to college. I need to straighten myself out. And I walked into the recruiter's office. It was the Army. And I depped in with the Army actually for Army diver, which I didn't want. But that's what they gave me. And I was like, no, I really want intel. I tried to find the Air Force recruiters, and they were never in their office. Shocker. The Navy, even though I had a pretty decent ASVAB score and everything, were like, oh, we don't really need you. And then I went to the Marine Corps recruiters and they were like, just come to one PT with us. It's just try it out. We know you're with the Army already. It's okay. So I went to the Marine Corps recruiters. I went to PT with them and I was like, no, you guys are my people. I will absolutely switch over. It was just something about the sense of family that comes even in the depth with the Marine Corps that I was like, yeah, these are my people.
It's very much a subculture of the military, which is its own culture to begin with.
Yeah, we're a little culty in the Marine Corps, which like really checks because I went to Penn State, which is also known for being kind of the same way. But yeah, so I switched over from Army Dep to Marine Corps Dep before my senior year of high school had even started. I was still 17. My parents had to sign the little waiver and everything, which was an interesting conversation with both of them.
Oh, you have to expand on that. So, I mean, they're both military, and
yeah.
One, I guess, why was it, maybe that was a little bit tough, but was it because of Marine Corps or why?
Yeah. To be brutally honest, my mom, I think my dad was just grateful I was making it out of high school. He was like, all right. He's like, well, it's kind of dangerous. And I was like, yeah, I got that. And then, so he signed the papers. But my mom, keeping it real like she always does, was just like, Rachel, you know, there aren't that many female Marines. If you join the Marine Corps, you have to be aware of the fact that you will probably be sexually assaulted. And at 17, of course, you're just like, nah, it won't happen to me. Like, nah, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, I'm friends with all of these guys. So she had that conversation with me and I didn't really believe her. And of course I got in the Marine Corps and like, I understand what she's talking about now. And yeah, she had that conversation with me at a time, but I'm pretty stubborn. And so I was dead set on doing it. And I was like, this is what I want to do. I have to do this. I can't go to college the way I am right now. So my parents signed everything. I went Dep Den, and then after graduating high school, I think it was like 3 or 4 weeks later, I went off to boot camp.
So you weren't in like ROTC or anything in high school. You kind of, you just very
like. No, absolutely not. No, I'm from Virginia Beach, Virginia, and we're very much like a relaxed, like kind of surfer community, like a little beach community.
I totally understand because I have a family that lives down there. So I spend a lot of time down at Virginia Beach, the jets flying over. And as you know, the Navy culture there is ingrained in that community. That's a huge base, Oceana. So yeah, I know the area like, well.
The SEAL base is down there, down at Dam Neck and Little Creek. So it's Marine Corps Intel School. It's there as well. So we have a lot of military around, but for some reason, for like locals, that doesn't really, it's almost like it numbs us to the military because we're so used to like the jet noise and stuff, which is why I don't understand when people complain about it, because I'm like, it's very normal.
Yeah. I live up here in Pittsburgh now, and you know, we might see a C-17. We have an Air Force Reserve base close by with the Pittsburgh International Airport. They're right beside each other. We don't hear jets. If an F-18 came screeching overhead here, at my time in Virginia Beach, I'd be like, oh, interesting. What's it doing in Pittsburgh? But I'm sure every other civilian would be like, what is going on? The world is ending. But down there, it's like, every hour you hear them flying overhead.
Yeah, I actually started writing for Vermont newspaper last summer, and they have jets here as well, with the Vermont Air National Guard. And it's like this big thing. They all hate it. They hate the fact that they're at the Burlington National Airport. And every couple of months, somebody will have like an article come up about people complaining about jet noise and how it's really distracting for their kids and it's like hurting their heads and everything. And I'm just like, wow, is this actually a thing?
I think going to concerts probably is hurting their head more than anything that a jet noise is going to make. Nobody's burning afterburners or going supersonic above your house. So something I'm interested in, because you know there aren't that many women Marine Corps veterans. So it's great to be able to talk to a part of the post 9/11 generation. Do you think it was important for your mom to have that conversation with you to start? Do you feel like that maybe grounded you a bit in like, okay, what am I about to step into?
Yes, but I didn't I was 17, so I didn't take her seriously at the time. And, Me Too wasn't a thing yet. So sexual assault and harassment wasn't really talked about at the time. And my mom, she tried to tell me, but it's just a totally different beast that I feel like recruiters are the ones who are responsible for getting you ready for. Yeah. Recruiters and drill instructors. Yeah, I'm glad she had the conversation with me, and I wish I had paid attention. I feel like if I was going in now, she had that conversation with me, I would pay more attention just because of the social climate that we have. But at the time, yeah.
And what was it like going into basic? Like, I imagine that growing up with two parents in the military was hard enough. Was the Marine Corps easier?
Yeah, three parents technically.
Three, yes, right.
Yeah, my stepdad's been a part of my life since, well, actually 9/11. That's when my mom remarried after that. Yeah, boot camp was interesting. So just real quick, boot camp, Marine Corps, basic, Army.
Thank you. That's good. Yeah. It's good for my civilian mind to know. So boot camp, Marine Corps, basic training is Army.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, so boot camp was interesting. I, of course, am very used to like getting yelled at and stuff, like with my parents.
Did you always have to, what is it, square your sheets? Is that what did you always? No, thank goodness.
I think with me, my parents gave up keeping my room clean. My sister, by the time I went to boot camp, my sister was in Penn State ROTC. So with her, it was much easier for them. And, it was a world they understood because she's going officer. My mom was an Army officer. Like, it was all something that they're familiar with. For me, it was just like, after I dipped in and I would, if I did something wrong or if I gave my parents lip or something, like my stepdad, especially, who had been in Afghanistan almost nonstop at this point for a while. And he was in Sangin with, it was like 1-5 or 3-5 for Marines. He would get in my face and like yell at me, and he would be like, "You want to be a Marine? Like, you can't even," and then insert thing that I had failed to do, like do the dishes, or like,
right.
Like, I think at one point, we were like we were laying bricks for the patio in our yard, and I was complaining about it because like, I don't want to do that.
Who does? Teenager, you want to lay bricks?
Yeah, I was like, I just want to go. I was playing sports at the time, and I'm sure I said something along the lines of like, I just want to go play sand soccer with my friends, or I just want to go play volleyball. And my stepdad would get in my face and just like yell at me. And it would be like drill instructor yelling. Like, there would be like spittle coming out.
You didn't have to drop and give him 20 or anything.
No, okay, I used to laugh actually when he, like, I'm not one of those people who's dumb enough to be like, yeah, I would punch a drill instructor in the face. I would laugh when my parents did it, because I was like, this is ridiculous. There's nothing is like this. Yeah. No, boot camp actually is like that. They actually do just get in your face and spit on you and like yell at you and insult you. Boot camp was interesting though. I was really in shape, and I was that recruit that would volunteer to do IT or intensive training when like other recruits were getting targeted. And even though a couple of them follow me on like Instagram or we're Facebook friends now, shout out if you guys listen to this, I'm pretty sure they hated me because I wasn't like super scared of them. I was like, I'm 5'7", like 150 something pounds. I'm like slightly on the larger side for women, and I wasn't super scared of them. There were like 2 drill instructors that kind of freaked me out. And other than that, boot camp was fun once you get past the like emotional trauma of like not sleeping and getting yelled at. And I had really short hair then. It was like up to my chin, and they used to call me recruit hair. And one of my drill instructors would leave pictures of pixie cuts on my bed as like a threat to like cut the rest of my hair off because they hated my hair. And they still call me recruit hair, like on Facebook. Like,
I think that's once you get the nickname, it kind of sticks with you for life, really. It's like, it's not something that just sort of ends, you know, once you get out of boot camp.
Yeah, like when I write a really good article or something, one of my drill instructors, I think she's a gunnery sergeant now, Gunnery Sergeant Hardy, she'll comment something, she'll be like, hair, and then she'll say something nice. But boot camp was fun. It's sometimes I wish I could go back, because you kind of go into autopilot while you're there. And so honestly, it's a very simple time if you can kind of just like tune things out.
Totally. And, you know, we've had a lot of women come on to the VBC, talk about their experiences. A lot of them say, like, I felt like I had to work harder than the males that were in with me to stand later. Out. What's that?
Yeah, that came later. You know, in 2013, boot camp wasn't integrated gender-wise, so I was only with women. We would see the men every now and again, but you know, not really. MCT, like I remember this Marine combat training, it's what you do after boot camp if you're not infantry. They go to ITB, and I remember it was the first night of MCT, and I think his name was Sergeant Crochet. I don't know, this was a while ago. He just kind of pointed at me and he was like, you're going to be a squad leader. And so then I was a squad leader, but of course we're with all of these like male Marines at this point. It's our first time. We're all like very nervous. Oh my God, what's going to happen? We're still kind of like recruit status because we've only had 10 days of leave. So some people are still talking in third person. And that was hard because you want to be the best. You're a Marine. You're very competitive. Most of us are natural leaders. And yeah, as a woman, you're kind of just like, I need to be seen as something other than, and excuse my language, but at boot camp, they tell you you're either going to be seen as a bitch or a slut, and you have to choose which one you're going to be.
Wow.
And you don't want that. You don't want that for yourself.
Right.
So it's hard because you're cognizant of that, and you're aware of the stories that male drill instructors tell their recruits about female Marines. And at the end of the day, you just want to be a Marine like anyone else. And you just want to, I'm going to say this and it sounds very weird. You just want to be loved like all the other Marines, because male Marines have this really intense bond with each other and they love each other, even if they hate one another. And at the end of the day, female Marines, like, that's all we want. We just want that too. We want to be sisters.
It's certainly, we talked about it being sort of a subculture, but certainly like the way that you find the group whenever you join the Marines and gain trust from everyone is difficult as everybody's starting to integrate with each other. Everybody's from different areas of the country. You kind of don't know. You're also just sort of dealing with yourself at 19, trying to like find your way through this. Did you feel like you came into the Marine Corps prepared to be a leader? Do you think the Marine Corps sort of brought that out of you?
I trying to think of how to say this. Well, not tending. Humbly, I've always been somewhat of a natural leader, and that's probably because I have officer parents, and they've always raised me to lead. So I've always been like sports captain, or I was my senior class vice president. Like I've president of the chess club.
Oh, see, I love playing chess. If you play chess, let's play. I love playing on chess.com.
Yeah. You know, I've had a mock trial, like Model UN, all of that. And, you know, you get into the military and it's a lot different because they drill into you that like lives are on the line all the time and all of this. And there's a lot of pressure, but you're also fresh out of high school and you're still a child.
Right.
So, you know, I would say that I came in as a leader, but I was a decent leader while I was in MOS school. I'm probably being hard on myself, but there are a lot of things I didn't take seriously. Like uniform inspections, I really didn't care about that. But I also was going through a lot personally at the time. And that reflected. And so I would say my leadership capability fell away until I got my mental health back under check, which hasn't been until I got out of the Marine Corps.
Right.
But from the side, outside of a billet, I would say there have always been times where I've tried to lead just to be helpful and to take care of others, and that's had to suffice, because when you don't have your mental health under control, which I can talk about more if you'd like, but you can't be a good leader if you're not doing okay yourself. And I wasn't for almost my entire Marine Corps career, just because of some things that happened. So
it's up to you if you'd like to dive into that, but I guess in the idea of women who may listen to this podcast and say, I'm not sure if I'm going to be good at this, or am I secure enough in myself to join the Marine Corps? Do I believe in myself? Without necessarily going to specifics, would you like to talk a bit about how you were able to work through those things and still be able to compete and, rise to the challenge of being a Marine?
Yeah. Okay. So, if you're a woman and you're going into a Marine Corps recruiter's office in the first place, you can do it. Because that's the hardest step, is even just putting into your head that you can do this. And it's so I just want to, anyone that's listening to this that's like in the depth or something, or is thinking about it, if you're even considering it, you can do it. Anyone really can. The best part about the Marine Corps is that on some level we all have this really like intense like heart. It's like willpower, because you have to in order to get through boot camp and in order to sign your name away on like a dotted line and everything. And for women especially, if you're thinking about it, you may not feel like you're physically strong enough or something, or fast enough, but you can get there. It's the spirit, it's the personality of a person, the character that you can't necessarily change. So if you have that anyways, you're going to be okay. And I think for female Marines too, what you'll learn is like, it's getting better with time, but female Marines, we do have each other's backs. A lot of us were raised into the Marine Corps with this mindset of, well, there's so few of us, only one of us can succeed at once. And it was very cutthroat, but that's getting better. And if you can remember to not be cutthroat and that more than one of you can succeed at the same time, it's going to be great. It's going to be okay.
I get chills with that. That's the type of thing that you think, like, would you have said that to yourself, 19, going into the Marine Corps?
I would have told myself to be a lot nicer to, I would have told 17, 18-year-old Rachel to be a lot nicer to other female Marines. I really loved my other female Marines, but I was very hard on them in the ways that shouldn't matter at all. Like, I definitely was somebody who let rumors get into my head, probably because a lot were spread about me as well, and it permeates everything. But yeah,
that's tough.
I would
have
wanted somebody to tell this to me.
Yeah, it was like in high school, like I remember, you hear rumors about you, and it really is. It's tough. Marine Corps is that's such a competitive atmosphere, and trying to stand out within that core, and then hearing these things, I can only imagine how difficult that must be to sort of work through while you're trying to excel.
And I would also say that it's not just for women Marines, but for everybody, it's not just trying to stand out, it's about trying to just survive. Is very mentally challenging being in the military, because this is something you notice when you get out too. They stress you out about things that have absolutely no importance whatsoever, to the point where everything stresses you out. Everything feels like a big deal. Being 1 minute late to work, or having like a flyaway on your uniform or something, or your hair being out of, like, just being not perfect every day. None of that actually matters. And when push comes to shove, when you're doing your job in the military, it doesn't matter either, as long as you are like following the protocols that are set in place to keep you alive and to keep your other like Marines and service members alive. The rest of it doesn't matter, but they don't tell you that. They stress you out about everything, and you're all at like DEFCON level 5 stress wise. And they also, at least, you know, when I was in, I'm sure this is still the same way, you're kind of just like a number, and that gets to you after a while. That really does.
Right. Let's jump forward into your deployments. You mentioned what your MOS, and I'm getting that right. Is that MOS in Marine Corps?
Yeah.
Great.
Yep.
You mentioned what your MOS was in your intro, but it sounded very confusing to my civilian ears. So I thought we would talk a bit about why you chose to do that and how you were trained for it.
Okay, yeah. So I was a Middle Eastern cryptologic linguist. At the time, it was a 2671. Now, I think it's been reclassed as 2641. So just cryptologic linguist, and your language becomes a BMOS. So I actually stepped in on an open contract for Intel. I didn't care which Intel field I got. I just wanted me Intel. And I was at Bootcamp, and I had passed the DLAB. That's the Defense Language Aptitude Battery Test, which kind of just gauges whether or not you're going to be good at learning languages. And I passed enough to get into like Cat 4 language, which is the highest. It's Arabic, I think Korean, Chinese, Japanese, and maybe Pashto, although that might be a Cat 3, I'm not sure. But anyways, so not a lot of people make, especially not in the Marine Corps, we're always hurting for linguists. Not a lot of people pass the DLAB, so I got pulled into some mass sergeant's office boot camp. We were like a month in, and they were just like, sign this. and it was like a new contract, and I was like, okay.
Can I talk to somebody first, or do you have to sign now?
I did use that as an excuse to call my mom from boot camp, because she had told me that this might happen, because she also went to the Defense Language Institute, which is where all military linguists go. She went to learn Spanish, and she was like, yes, take this job, Rachel. This will set you up for life, skill wise, like absolutely, you will love this, take it. So I signed it. I was like, all right. I get out of MCT, and I go to the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California, beautiful place. I really miss it. I wish I had taken more advantage of it while I was there. 16 months straight of 8 hours a day learning Arabic, and I was Levantine. So Levantine is the dialect of Arabic that is spoken in Palestine, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. And then at the same time, for Levantine linguists, you learn to read Modern Standard Arabic, which is its own separate, not language, but kind of, but classification, a DLI. So we have linguists in the military who are just Modern Standard Arabic, but Levantine does both. So I did that. And then you go to San Angelo, Texas, to learn the signals intelligence side of your job, because it's cryptologic linguist. So it's all of this gear that I'm trying to think of what I'm allowed to say. It's
oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. I was like, there might be some top secret stuff here, but yeah.
Yeah. So don't worry, I'll dumb it down classification wise. So basically, it's a bunch of communications collections gear that you use, and then whatever you collect, you use your language to translate and interpret. So that was my job. That's about another 6 months to do. There's a little bit of linguistic training that you do while you're there, but then also the signals intelligence part of your training happens there. And then I got stationed in Camp Pendleton, California. I was at 1st Radio Battalion, 1st Radbin or Sadbin. If you ask Radbiners, that's what we call it, is Sadbin.
Because it's not a very happy place?
No, we're all like very clinically depressed. It's great. So yeah, I did that, and I deployed on the 15th MU as the linguist analyst for an LAV EW, so electronic warfare team. But while I was a part of that, it didn't look like my team was going anywhere, because LAVs really haven't gone anywhere in like a while, conflict wise. at least not from Muse. And so I actually got pulled over to work with 1st Recon, who were also on the deployment, and they kind of would use me as like a legitimate translator, which is not part of my training.
I've heard that cool. A lot in the military. It's like, here, we're going to train you to do this, but you're going to do this.
It was wild. Like at one point, one of the like workups for the deployment, they just handed me a megaphone and they were like, all right, we need you to say this. And I was like, oh, this isn't what I'm trained to do. Like,
what did you freak? Did you like do it? You just like, you have to.
I did. It's I still find it incredibly ironic that I was a military linguist, because growing up I had a speech impediment for like 6 or 7 years. Like I was in speech therapy for that long.
Wow.
So the fact that I was a linguist and that they gave me Arabic of all things, like I can't roll my R's, for example. I would be absolutely hopeless in Spanish, and then they gave me Arabic. And I was like, this is a cruel twist of fate.
Yeah, and I was going to ask if you sort of had like a past history or proclivity for just learning different languages, or had you learned anything prior?
No.
You just, yeah.
I mean, I speak a little bit of French and German, just because, you know, my mom got sent over to Germany post 9/11, and so I partially grew up in Stuttgart, Germany. Okay. So I speak a little bit of German, just conversationally, and I've taken French pretty much since like middle school or something. And then post Marine Corps, I'm getting off track, but like for like a month or two, I went to university randomly in France, and I just sat and studied for like a little bit.
Fun.
Yeah.
Very cool.
But yeah, being a linguist on deployment was interesting. And then I went from being a translator for Recon for a little bit on ship, doing like BBSS missions, which are like ship raids at sea, to I got pulled over again because I was also proficient in Iraqi. I did a conversion course at San Diego State. It was like 2 months, and they were like, okay, we'll take you from modern standard Arabic to Iraqi, which was hard because I'm a Levantine linguist, and all of the other linguists in class were modern standard. So I had to like really catch up. It was a lot.
That first deployment, you say deployment, where did you go?
Yeah, that was my only deployment. We went to the Middle East and North Africa. Okay. So we first stopped. I mean, we have all the little fun stops along the way, like Hawaii, and we went to Vietnam and Thailand. And then after Thailand, we went to Djibouti, Camp Lemonnier, which is a naval base, and still to this day, I will argue, has the best chow hall I've ever been at.
Hear that, listeners? Anybody that listens in, if you have a better chow hall,
let us know.
Yeah,
because they have Belgian waffle Mondays at Camp Lemonnier. At least while I was there, like nice. Little Marine me was like, "What is this?" And then from Lemonnier, I got pulled over to the SP MAGTF, actually, which is a different kind of deployment for Marines. So I went from a MU, a Marine Expeditionary Unit, to the SP MAGTF, which is the Special Purpose Marine Air Ground Task Force. And I went over there with 1-5, which is an infantry battalion, as part of a signal support team. So I was a linguist analyst for them. And we were in Kuwait. And then let me back up. When I got attached to 1-5, they were with the MU, and then they went to Kuwait. Some things were popping off in Syria at the time, and they were thinking that they might be going there. Okay. But then we were in Camp Beering, just kind of sitting in like tent city there, and 1-5 was clearly not going to be going forward anymore. But the SP MAGTF was like, yes, we need a signal support team. We'll take you guys. So they did. They just took my signal support team from the MU and from 1-5, who had taken us from our various ships on the MU. And we went to Jabber in Kuwait, and which is much smaller than Beering. And I sat there for a couple months and did some linguisty things in like a little shipping container in the middle of nowhere. And we got to run like a handful of air missions going into certain places like Iraq and Syria and Jordan, I think, as well. And yeah, then the rest of my deployment was just your average sitting in a room with no windows and listening.
It's what I always kind of think of the linguists are always sitting there just in the dark room, listening in on things. But being deployed, was that it? Yeah. was being deployed its own sort of culture shock? Like, were you excited to be deployed?
I was.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually broke my hip while I was in MLS school, and I didn't know I broke my hip. Mm-hmm. And nobody believed me, which is a whole nother tangent you can go off on military medicine and how they treat female service members. And it took a year for them to give me an MRI. And then they were like, oh, hey, your hip's broken.
How did you break your hip?
I think it was an overuse injury at the time. Okay. So we're at 2014. I'm in MLS school. I'm learning Arabic. And the Marine Corps is testing out whether or not they want to allow women into recon and infantry units. And being signals intelligence, we have something called radio recon, which is where they send signals intelligence Marines into recon. They train you up, and then you join something called like a radio reconnaissance team. It's essentially where they drop signal supports teams into the middle of nowhere in really dangerous places, and you do your SIGINT thing. You have the recon background, so they can drop you random places. That's my very quick Spark Notes version of what that is. I'm sure there's more to it. And the master guns at the time, I was captain of the female run team on base, and as a squad leader and everything, and I was very in shape. I was running like a half marathon every Friday just for fun. And
you see my face. Anybody who's listening or watching on YouTube, you see my. I on a whim, as a side story, I on a whim decided to run a half marathon because I was like, okay, I've done some 5Ks. I'll go run the half marathon. That almost killed me. This is just like one that I got about maybe 9 miles in, and my leg cramped up, and the 90-year-old women were burning past me in that last like quarter of that thing. But that stuff, to be able to do that would you say once a week you were doing that?
Yeah, every Friday, a group of the Marines and I, from my platoon, we would go down, and Monterey, California is a very beautiful place. So it's a great running place. Big Sur is right there. So we would go and we would run after class on Friday, let off a little steam. The older Marines would then go drink afterwards, and the rest of us would go back to the barracks. Yeah. But we started off just running your basic 3-5 miles, and then the people in the group realized that all of us could kind of run more, and so we just kept going up until we were hitting 10, 11, 12, 13 miles every Friday, just because.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was great. So the master guns there, Master Gunnery Sergeant Reeves, I don't even know where he is anymore, but if he's listening, hi. He thought I stood a chance of making it through basic reconnaissance course, and so I was doing these little recon prep PTs that he was running for people, and I was doing my normal squad PT, and I was doing female run team, and I was doing our detachment volleyball teams and soccer and flag football, and I wasn't stretching because I was 19 and I thought I was invincible. And one day I was just walking back from class, and I had sheared through all of the cartilage in my hip on the right side. I just fell over, and I was really confused what happened because it hurt so bad. And then I stood up. I was like, you're okay, you're okay. And then a couple minutes later, I was like, I'm okay, but I didn't feel anything. And then I found out later that again I teared through all the cartilage in my hip, and I hadn't realized it. And yeah, so I had hip surgery, and fast forward, and we're now in 2016, 2017. My contract was supposed to be up in July of 2018, and I was like, coming from the family that I come from, I was like, I have to deploy. I have to. I can't just sit here. We work missions from 1st Radio Battalion in California that are real-time missions and everything. So I was doing my job, but for some reason, the mentality is if you don't deploy, you're less than. And I was like, I have to. And so I pulled myself off of limited duty. I went to one of my female staff sergeants. She might have been a gunny at the time. And I was like, they were considering pulling over another linguist for the 15th MU, who he was only proficient in modern standard Arabic. And I went up to her, and Staff Sergeant Levy, and I was like, Staff Sergeant Levy, I'm proficient in Levantine and Iraqi and Modern Standard Arabic. I was like, I'm more qualified than he is. I'm not slated for any deployment. This might be my last chance to do anything. Like, I was married at the time. I was like, my marriage is falling apart. Like, I need this. And she went to bat for me. She's probably the only reason I got it. She went to bat for me. She's like, she's more qualified. They were like, all right, if you can run and pass a PFT and a CFT, because I'd just come off of limited duty, having had hip surgery. And I did, which is great. I'm still surprised I did, because I had been, hip surgery sucks.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how I got on my deployment. Kind of was like, I have to do this. So was that the smartest choice physically? No, but I'm glad I did it.
Right.
So.
Boy, you lived a life in like these 4 years. I feel like we could talk for another hour just strictly about like everything that you experienced there. But I want to also, I want to respect your time, because, this is so interesting, but also like, we've talked about you becoming an aspiring war correspondent. One question I want to get to before that is, you got out after 5.5 years, a lot of your family served for over 20. Were you okay with leaving at that time?
No.
Yeah.
No. When I was on deployment, I put in a re-enlistment packet, and it came back. And it came back when I got home from deployment, and I had just gotten word that I had also torn the labrum in my left hip. Not as bad as my right hip, but while I was on deployment, I remember this moment. I was walking on ship, and I was going through one of the little like porthole things on the floor. And it's this like sickening, like squelch rip feel when you tear it the first time. I remember it happening on my left hip, and it's like, oh no, Rachel, you did not. And then I had to ignore it because I was on deployment. And so I didn't say anything, because I didn't want to leave for myself, but also for my team, because I was the only linguist on ship at that point. Yeah. At least for Arabic, we had a Farsi linguist with us, but that's not super helpful with Arabic. And when I got back, and when my re-enlistment packet got back, I had just gotten my MRI results back on my left hip, and I knew that was it for me. I knew that I would probably get medically separated, and I could have taken the re-enlistment spot, but a couple of my friends were waiting on boat spaces to fill up, to open up, which is how do you know how the Marine Corps does re-enlistment?
For my audience, please.
Okay, we have something called boat spaces per MOS. There's a set number, so not everyone can re-enlist. They will only take a certain number, and they're called boat spaces. If I had taken that re-enlistment packet, I would have taken the last boat space for my fiscal year. And knowing what I knew about my injury at the time, and knowing that I had friends that still wanted to re-enlist really badly, I was devastated, but I couldn't do it in good conscience. And so I was like, you know what? This wasn't meant to be.
Yeah. I
signed no on my re-enlistment papers, and I told all my friends I was really happy to turn it down, like we all do. Like, F the Marine Corps, that I was devastated. I actually tried to go back in last year, 2 years ago, just started talking to recruiters and stuff again, but it's the VA hasn't fixed my hips or anything. They won't replace my hip because I'm only 27. So I'm in this like awkward, I can walk and I can sort of run sometimes, not really. I'm like living a physically half life right now. So it just wasn't going to happen. I had to let that go, which has been really hard, especially watching my sister. She's now been in longer than I have. She's at year 6 or 7 now. It's hard.
Do you take pride in the fact that like you went for all of it? So like you didn't just kind of go in and like, yeah, I'll do the minimum that's requirements of the Marine Corps, but like it seems like for those years that you were in, that you bit off everything you could chew.
I'm very comforted by the fact that when I first got hurt at MOS school, I had been trying to go the radio recon route. I've been preparing for it. And even though that wasn't in the cards for me, I deployed with recon anyways. And I'm very reassured by that fact. And it wasn't because Recon just came up to me one day on ship and was like, we need you. It was because I went to them and I basically put myself out. I was like, do you guys need a linguist, a translator? Because like, I'll do that. Yeah. Like I was on the mess deck just talking to them. Like I was serving food, because everyone at some point when you're on ship has to do things like clean or serve food. Yeah. And I was serving food to some of the Recon like sergeants, and I was just like, just so you guys know, like I am proficient in 3 different types of Arabic, and I would love to work with you guys if you ever need me. And they told their captain, Captain Rudder, and yeah, that's how I got pulled over. So I still did the things I wanted to, just in a different capacity, which is something I am still coming to terms with in every aspect of my life. So.
Well, that's something that I've always been intrigued by. You know, the last 2 years working with BBC and talking with veterans is that there's this long, in a lot of people that serve, there's this desire to serve, and that doesn't leave you when you leave service. So, you know, you left the Marine Corps, but now becoming like an aspiring war correspondent, writing for militarytimes.com. You know, is that coming out of that desire to still serve and serve in a different capacity?
Yeah. Yeah, I've had this conversation with my mom a lot, actually, because she has to remind me that there's different ways to serve and to make an impact. It's not just like the military. Military Times, it came out of nowhere. I was supposed to start my graduate program at NYU last fall. I graduated from Penn State in August, and I was supposed to start at NYU 2 weeks later. But again, take care of your mental health, people, because I just wasn't doing well. And I was like, I'm not going to make it if I go to NYU right now. Like, I'm not doing okay. I need to get some things like under control. And so I applied to an internship with Military Times, and I kind of hassled them until they hired me.
There's a mirror here to being on the deck and saying, hey, I could do this.
Yeah, it's getting people to listen to you. And yeah, Military Times is just, I wanted to write for Military Times because I had an in, honestly, because journalism is it can be really hard to break into. Yeah. It's very competitive and it doesn't pay well. But I've wanted to be a journalist since I was like 12 years old. So I was like, oh, I'm just going to go for it. Military Times is my in. And so I got the Military Times gig, I think partly because I'm a decent writer, but mostly because I'm a veteran. And so I know the content that we write. Yeah. And it's been great. I like writing for Military Times and on military topics because you can write about the topics that, like, as a junior enlisted, for example, never were talked about and needed to be. Like right now, I'm working on a piece on the lack of miscarriage policies in the military and how this affects service members, both male and female, because right now, commands don't have to give you any sort of bereavement leave or anything. The policy just says that they can. It doesn't say they have to. And so, of course, you have some commands that will give you all the time in the world that you need to recover. And then you'll have the other commands that are like, we'll see you for a PFT in 2 days, which is horrible. Yeah. So I get to write about that now, and I get to help, and I get to still be part of the family. Right. And not just my family, but the military family. The war correspondent thing probably stems more from my childhood and watching my mom and my stepdad deploy to like Afghanistan and everything. Like one time my mom brought me home a burqa, like the blue ones that they wear in Afghanistan. Yeah. And she made me walk around the house in it. And
that's like a very different childhood than I had.
Yeah. And for a while we still do this actually. Razia's Ray of Hope is this really great organization where they pay for the education of an Afghan girl K through 12. And every year for my birthday and Christmas, we would still get gifts, but our big gift every year would be the paying of an education for an Afghan girl. So obviously all of this, I'm picking my parents up from the airport, or, I'm on these long international phone calls with them every other weekend while, I'm going to like soccer games or something. It ingrained something in me, and now I'm just like, I just want to be a war correspondent because there's so many stories that need to be told over there. in pretty much every conflict zone, whether it's in Africa or the Middle East. You know, even South America is falling apart right now, and it may not be like a literal war zone, but it is a conflict zone, and I'd be more than happy to go report from there. But those stories need to be told, and that's what I want to do. That's how I want to serve now, so to speak. So
it's something like that I take a lot of pride in with my position here with VBC, is getting the stories from the veterans, because those stories, everybody's story needs to be told. And it's certainly important for the civilians to hear these types of stories, especially yours being so unique. If you look through, if you go to Military Times and you look up Rachel's list of articles, there's a lot of different types of ones. And there are the ones that are sort of like, let's report on a death in the military. Yeah. And then there's ones like your trip to Ukraine, which I do want to talk about next. But first I want to ask, you know, that's a very different style of writing, to write about a death that happened in the military, as opposed to like being, you know, taking yourself over to Ukraine and going through Ukraine. And talent wise, technically wise, you know, how do you navigate those types of articles?
For the record, I hated writing about my experience in Ukraine because I don't like writing about myself. And when you go to J school, the American style is to not write in first person, and to not include yourself in the story. So like I wrote, when I went to Ukraine, I was trying my hand at freelancing, and I wrote an article for New York Magazine, which is huge for a starter journalist. Like I still am pinching myself that even happened. But at one point the editor was like, okay, we want you to fill things in, then instead of saying like Kathy Stickle said, Kathy Stickle is the woman that I profiled for my article, instead of saying like Stickle said, they wanted me to write things like Stickle told me as we drove past the Polish border, which is just something that I'm not, you know, I don't like writing myself into things, and having written like intelligence reports and stuff in the Marine Corps, it's like, you're not a part of it.
Yeah.
So that's, technically speaking, that's been very difficult. But, you know, writing like death notices, unfortunately, that is essentially just regurgitating press releases. And there's a very particular way that you write it, and all it takes is to just read a couple of previous ones and you know how to write it, and you know how to be respectful, which is the biggest key when you're doing that. And a lot of it's not stuff that they teach you in school, and a lot of it is. I'm really lucky. Penn State has a great journalism program. 10 out of 10 recommend any veteran goes to Penn State, partly because I worked in the veterans office there with Chioma and everyone that you interviewed last. Yep. But also partly because Penn State's just very veteran friendly, and it's a wonderful school that's opened a million doors for me. So that's my Penn State plug. But
no, I'm sure they're going to very much appreciate that, you know, having been on the program as well. But so your time in Ukraine, you decide to go over there. You know, your parents, they've been in the military, they understand going into dangerous areas. Obviously, Ukraine is a hot zone right now. You said, "Hey, I'm heading over there." What was the reaction?
They didn't. I gotta be honest, I didn't tell my dad. I told my mom, who told my stepdad. And so what happened was, it was Chioma's spring break, right, at Penn State. It was her spring break. We went to Greece. Instead of coming back to the States, I was like, I feel like I have to do something. So I went to Poland, because Poland is the easiest way into Ukraine right now. And so I flew over to Poland. I've been there before. I went backpacking after I got out of the Marine Corps for a little bit. So I went to Krakow. I was like, all right. So I started looking for stories while I was in Krakow. And then I found Kathy Stickle. And at that point, I called my mom and I was like, Mom, this lady that I'm following for a story, I pitched it to New York Mag. They've accepted. We're going into Ukraine. And she's like, well, having had the career that I've had, I can't talk you out of it. I'm not going to try. She's like, I know you can take care of yourself. I'm super proud of you. And that was about it. That was the conversation we had. She and my stepdad, who works for UCOM, were like, okay, here's what we do want you to do though. Just be careful. They had me sign up for like the STEP program, which is absolutely useless in Ukraine right now because nobody's really at the embassy. They like sort of are, but not really. So they told me that too. They were like, at the time they were actually not in the embassy. They're like, okay, if something happens to you, you're kind of on your own. So I reached out to Thomas Gibbons Neff with the New York Times and Dan Lamoth with Washington Post, who are both former Marines and who I've been going to for career advice, because Thomas Gibbons Neff is the Kabul bureau chief for the New York Times. He has the job that I want. He's a wonderful person and he's a mentor, so that's great. And I was like, okay, Thomas Gibbons Neff at the time was in Kharkiv. Yeah, he's in Kharkiv at the time, and I was like, all right, I'm going to Ukraine. What do I need to know? And then, he's like, okay, I'll let my security team know where you're going to be. I was like, in Odessa, it's Black Sea port. And he was like, don't go farther than Mykolaiv without like a flak jacket and stuff. Dan Lamoth put me in touch with the Washington Post reporter in Mykolaiv, which is kind of close to Odessa. So people were aware of where I was, but it was also, it's not something I would recommend doing, because I did go in without like a Kevlar and a flak, and I was on my own, and I don't speak, in Eastern Ukraine, they speak Russian. I don't speak Russian at all. But I let people know. I reached out to as many like experts as I could find, and I was like, this is what I want to do, I'm doing it. They're like, all right, well, if you're that sure, this is all the advice we can offer you. And so then I just kind of went.
Were you, I want to use the term chasing a story, but it's like, did you go in with a particular mindset of like, I'm going to go and experience this and report on what I see? Or were you like, I want to go to a particular area and report on what's there?
I only went into Ukraine with a story. I was not going to just go in blindly, because there's a difference between brave and bravado. So I went in with my Kathy Stickle story. Who's an American woman. She runs evacuation missions into Ukraine by herself. She's also an Army vet. And I followed her into Ukraine. I went with her on her mission up until Odessa, and then she left me there for like a week while she went into or near Kherson. She didn't actually make it past the Russian checkpoints. They wouldn't let her. But I went in chasing that one particular story, and then while I was there, my little like SIGINT intel brain was like, you should take notes. So I took notes when we went through Ukrainian military checkpoints, and when I was in Odessa, and I would just look around, and I would just kind of like jot things down for my personal memory and for the story, of course, because you have to add context. And and then I sent the article I wrote for Military Times. Actually, I partly wrote that as like, it was my editor's idea for me to write that story, as like comeuppance for the fact that I had written this story for New York Magazine, that technically could have qualified as a Military Times story. It's just Military Times insurance wise wasn't going to cover me going into Ukraine, and for that piece I really needed to. So again, I didn't really breach contract, but it also was an interesting piece, and nobody else was really like talking to me about it yet, going in. So that's how that came about. I'm sorry, did I answer everything?
You did. And it's interesting because we've had a civilian who was embedded with a group of Marines in Afghanistan, Wesley, who he came out, wrote an incredible book, and came onto the podcast and was talking about it. We talked to them about like, you're a civilian, why are you putting yourself into this type of dangerous atmosphere? Is it to report on what's going on, to let civilians know what's going on? It was all of that, but I think part of the thing that amazed myself and my co-hosts on the Scuttlebutt was just the danger that was involved in that. I think it's a little different if you've been trained as a Marine and you were deployed as a Marine and you've been to sort of like, maybe not the kinetic areas, but definitely hot spots. So you kind of know what to expect. Did you experience any fighting in Ukraine when you were there, or any danger, or did you feel, where you were at was safe?
So we drove into Ukraine from Krakow, and we drove straight in through underneath Lviv and straight into central Ukraine, and then almost like a dead drop south to Odessa. Took about 12 or 13 hours. I think at like and of course the entire time you're going through just like series after series of Ukrainian checkpoint, and which kind of lends like a factor of like danger, because why would you be going to military checkpoints in a direction that nobody else is going in?
Yeah.
If everything's entirely safe. And then the closer we started getting to Odessa, you started seeing like bombed out gas stations and like buildings that have been destroyed.
Was that your first experience with something like that?
No. And one of the air missions I went to, or the air mission I did on deployment, we like stopped in the middle of this, like, it was a ghost town essentially at this point. It was just bullet riddled though. It was in the middle of the desert somewhere. I don't even remember where we were. I think that was Syria. And that was more what I was expecting from a war zone. Ukraine is very different, because for somebody who's grown up in like Germany, for example, it looks like Germany. Okay, like it's a Western country, and it's under attack. It's in the middle of a war, and it's wild because in Odessa, like, there are kids there that look like Penn State kids. Not kids, they're young adults. And it's very weird and very chilling in a way that sticks with you more than somewhere that is entirely removed from everything you've ever known. And I think having the childhood that I've had, war zones, I'm a bit more nonchalant about them because my family is. Right. And so to me, I view that as like somewhat normal, which is very unhealthy, and probably also contributed to my idea that it was a good idea to go into a war zone by myself. So there's that. It is also different going into Ukraine, not being in the military, because when you're in the military, you have the sense of being with all of your friends and knowing that somebody will pull you out if something happens, or at least they'll try to. And then you've got gear and you've got backup. Being a civilian is different because you don't have that, and you're acutely aware of that fact. So you have the mindset of a Marine where, okay, I'm going into a war zone, whatever, like, this is what I'm trained to do. This is fun, and like, no big deal. And then you also have the factors that make it even more of a big deal. So it's hard. It's a hard dichotomy.
We talked a bit at the beginning about bridging military-civilian divide. Is part of your reporting, the idea of reaching that goal, being able to report on war zones, report on what's going on in the military for a civilian, for the civilians who might need to know this information, or might be interested in this information, or need to learn?
I think my goal of reporting, I actually haven't thought about this before. I think my goal of reporting is more giving a voice to the people that I'm writing about, and the impact it can have on them, and less about who my audience is, which, thinking about it now from like an academic standpoint or professional standpoint is probably not the best business practice. You always have to write for your audience. That being said, it's not really part of my goal. My like ultimate career aspiration, or just like role model, is Marie Colvin, and she was killed by the Syrian government in like 2011 or 2012. But she wrote the stories that people were scared to get to, and she gave those people voices. And I think that there is nothing more noble than giving somebody a voice. And that's my career goal. It's
interesting,
just to write about that.
If she was writing for their stories, what did you end up learning from her beyond just that, beyond just getting those stories out, and looking at her as a mentor? What did you kind of learn from her that you want to apply to yourself? Humanity.
Yeah. She had a way of writing about people that just, we're all very different, spread out through even just this country, but across the world. And sorry, working meal. So we're all, it can be hard sometimes to empathize with people that are not like you, obviously. And her writing makes it so hard to view somebody as anything other than your sister or your brother or your mother or your child, even if you don't have one. Like, that's what her writing does. And sure, she wrote about just like conflict zones or whatever, but this is a woman who has interviewed like Gaddafi and humanized him. And like, she's managed to humanize some of the world's worst people.
Yeah.
And there's nothing better than that for like a journalist. At least that's what I think. So that's what she gave me taught me was humanity. It's a shame that she was killed, and that nobody really, outside of the war correspondence reporting field, nobody ever really talks about her, which is weird. Like, I never heard about her in journalism school. I only know who she was because, again, my family background. My mom told me to read her book In Extremis, which is about her entire life. Great book. Anyone who is interested in conflict zones should definitely read it.
And this is something that kind of brought me to you as a journalist. We were talking within VBC, our staff, just about like, hey, who can we reach out to? And my executive was like, what about this one, Rachel? And it made me think, like, we looked at Military Times, but there are a lot of different military, news sources for a civilian to look into. Are there reporters from your generation that are reporting in all of these different avenues, Task and Purpose, Military Times, all of these different areas that you look up to, that you say, if you want to read somebody, read them. Like, these are places that I get my news from.
Yeah, I gotta be honest, I was super surprised when you guys reached out to me. I'm very new to the field. I'm only on month 9 or 10 at this point of being a journalist. And so I was surprised. I'm flattered, of course, but also surprised. James Laporta with the AP, he's a former Marine as well. He has essentially held my hand through every aspect of my career so far. And he's also had a really interesting career. He's an investigative reporter for the AP now, but he's also written for military publications. And he also has contributed to shows like This Is Us when they do portrayals of military members. It's fascinating. He has a very different side of being a journalist. And then Haley Britsky, I've actually never talked to her. I've never met her, but she writes for Task and Purpose, and I just think she's a wonderful writer. She's a great reporter. And she writes about stories that really matter, and she doesn't flinch away from harder subjects, whether that's sexual assault or I'm trying to think what some of the other more recent ones have been.
I remember coming across her most articles.
Recent was, I think her most recent was sexual assault, and it was from an airman who was speaking out on TikTok. It was great. That was yesterday. Thomas Givensneff, New York Times. I think he's great. He wrote a really wonderful piece this week about the human standpoint of seeing a corpse in war and kind of having a really hard time not looking. It was beautiful. He's a brilliant writer. Of course, he's got the New York Times behind him, which is almost every journalist's dream. I hope I end up there one day. That's my plan for after grad school. I'm hoping I can kind of weasel my way in.
There was a name, Phil Clay, who I've sort of followed a bit, and I'm reading his more recent book, and he was a Marine. I found him very interesting. I don't know if you've read his stuff. I know the name and I know the book, but I don't know if I've necessarily read some of his things recently. Being the early bird editor of Military Times means that I go through a gross amount of news every single morning, and I unfortunately have stopped looking at the reporters' names and have just been looking at headlines because it's just incredibly hard to keep track of everything. So. Well, Rachel, I want to thank you so much for coming on to the Scuttlebutt. I'm so happy that we were able to connect and have you on and just hear so much about your story. There's so much here. That's such a rich story to understand and what you went through just in that brief time in the Marine Corps. I'm sure it felt brief to you, but it's incredible. It's really wonderful, and it's just an honor and a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you. And again, honored and still kind of surprised that you wanted to speak to me too. So
well, we're going to be following your career. I hope you make it New York Times. That'd be fantastic. I hope that you'll come back on the Scuttlebutt if we're still here at that time. But thank you again to our audience. Please like, share, subscribe, ring the bell on YouTube. If you have responses or questions about this episode, you can email me at Shaun, SHAUN, at veteransbreakfastclub.org. Make sure you follow Rachel on militarytimes.com for all of her upcoming articles. And Rachel, thank you again.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for watching this episode of The Scuttlebutt. I'd like to take a moment to thank both of our sponsors, the first being D&D Metal Recycling and Auto Salvage. They began as a small hauling and used auto parts operation in the Pittsburgh area in the late 1970s, but they've grown into a full-service metal recycling company with 2 locations, Lawrenceville and Tarentum. D&D accepts all types of metal, both ferrous and non-ferrous, that may be generated by industrial manufacturing, construction, and demolition, small commercial entities, as well as individual customers. They have a wide variety of material handling equipment and are capable of managing any type of job in a timely and efficient manner. You can contact them for quotes and availability at D&D. That's D&D autosalvage.com. Thank you so much to D&D. They've been a sponsor for quite some time, and we really appreciate their support. The second being tobacco-free Adagio Health. They are dedicated to reducing and preventing tobacco use and to getting the word out about the hazards of smoking and secondhand smoke. They're all about health. So they want people to quit, and they have classes and nicotine replacement therapy and a popular quit line, which is the easiest number to remember ever, 1-800-QUIT-NOW. They also educate people, children especially, about tobacco use from cigarettes, cigars, pipes, chew, snuff, and other nicotine products like vaping. Finally, tobacco-free Adagio Health advocates for public and private policies that ensure healthy places to live, work, and play. You can learn all of what tobacco-free Adagio Health offers at tobaccofree.adagiohealth.org, or you can watch our recent episode with tobacco-free Adagio Health on the Scuttlebutt, where they talk about a lot of the programs that they offer for those who are looking to quit. Thank you to both of our sponsors for their continued support of the Scuttlebutt podcast. We really appreciate it. Thanks.